bothered by the frost, by that crazy stuff we got last night. But within the next 3 or 4 weeks, we're going to start planning other things. Well, what if we just sat around and said, well, what if it frosts? What if we have a late frost? What if we get a gully washer in the springtime? I'm not going to do anything right now. What if we get so much sun in the summertime that it dries out the ground and everything? What if? What if? What if? Do we do that as Christians? I'm not going to do this because what if somebody complains? What if somebody says something about, what if what I do is not as good as what somebody else does? What if what I do is not good? What if? And then we wind up not doing anything. Now, in our class on Wednesday nights, we're studying 1 Corinthians. And next week, not this Wednesday, but the next week in chapter 4 of 1 Corinthians, the Apostle Paul emphasizes that we are not answerable to one another in that sense, but rather we are servants of God. And so when God calls us into service, we need to remind ourselves that I'm serving God, not my fellow man. And God is the one I'm needing to please. And God is saying, what do you have in your hand? What can you do now with what you have? That is the heart of a servant. He does what he can with what he has. Servants, number 4, dedicate themselves to every task. Solomon says in the book of Ecclesiastes, whatever your hand finds to do, do it with your mind. What you do, Paul says in Colossians chapter 3 and verse 23, do to the glory of God. A servant with a servant's heart dedicates himself or herself to every task. We try to see everything through to its conclusion. We try to put our best into what we're doing. We're trying to fulfill the responsibility that we have. We dedicate ourselves to the task at hand. Jesus, again, is our example. And Jesus fed the multitudes, thousands of people. Jesus allowed his schedule to be interrupted so that he could put children on his knee and he could bless them. Jesus took time out of his schedule to go help a woman who was grieving because her only child was dead. Jesus gave himself to every task that God the Father had put before him. Jesus gave himself in daily acts of service. And so that's what he calls us to do. Now Jesus tells us in Matthew chapter 10 and verse 24 that a disciple is not above his teacher, and a servant is not above his master. And so Jesus used his life every day serving others, that he expects us to do the same. He's not going to allow us to be more lazy than he was. And of course he wasn't lazy at all, was he? So a servant has the heart that says, I'm going to put myself into every task that my Father has put before me. Now, it's likely that any one of us as individuals is not going to accomplish something extraordinary. Likely not a one of us, despite the fact that we probably could, we're never going to write an autobiography. We're not ever going to have somebody that says, I want to write a book about your life. We're not going to accomplish something extraordinary. But that's not what God calls us to do. God says, I want you to give your life to ordinary acts of service. And we can be great in God's eyes. Jesus says, if we serve in ordinary acts of service. Give our hearts to what God has given to us. Number 5, a person with a servant's heart is faithful to their service. Here's one of those verses from 1 Corinthians chapter 4 that we're going to study in a couple of weeks. 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 2, the Apostle Paul says that it is necessary in a servant or a steward that a man be found faithful or that he be found trustworthy. That means that when God has given us a task laid before us, then we fulfill God, yes, when we're baptized in the cross, we say, God, I'm going to give you my life. And we keep that promise. We say, God, whatever you give me to do, then I'm going to fulfill that responsibility. Because it's important in God's eyes. And I know it's important in God's eyes because it's the task that God gave me to do. And if God gave me to do it, then it's important to Him. And so we need to be faithful in what God has given to us. And if we are faithful in these small things that God gives us here on this earth to do, we have that promise in Matthew chapter 25 and verse 23. When we stand before Jesus on the day of judgment and He separates the sheep from the goats, He'll say to the sheep, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a few things, I will make you ruler over many. Enter in the joys of your Lord. Good and faithful. The Christian with a servant's heart is faithful in the task that he or she has. We see it through to the end. We put our best into it, and we fulfill the task that God has given before us. And then finally, number 6. Servants don't care who gets the credit. Because we're not after the glorification from man. We're not after having somebody write a biography about us. We're wanting to have God be pleased with us. We're wanting to have our names inscribed in the Lamb's Book of Life, and so we don't care who gets the credit, just so it gets done. 1 Peter chapter 5 and verse 5. The Apostle Peter says, clothe yourself in what? Humility. For it is written, God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Clothe yourselves with humility. And so we come to God, as Jesus did His apostles in the upper room, on our knees, saying, God, I'm willing to wash your feet. Humility. Turn to Ephesians chapter 6, and let's read some verses here from Ephesians chapter 6. In this passage, the Apostle Paul is talking about, in the first century, of course, he's talking about slaves serving their masters. And we as Christians are certainly slaves of Jesus Christ. The context would also apply to our relationship with our employer, an employee-employer relationship. But notice that serving God in order to be seen by men doesn't happen. We serve God to be seen by God. And we don't care who gets the credit. Ephesians 6, beginning at verse 5. Slaves, be obedient to those who are your masters, according to the flesh, with fear and trembling, and the sincerity of your heart. Notice, as to Christ. When we serve in our secular jobs, and we do it, just like we're talking this morning, with our whole heart, we do it to help the company be a better, stronger company. We don't care who gets the credit on the assembly line. We just want to see the job get done because that's our responsibility. Paul here says you're serving Christ. You're serving Jesus Christ when you serve your employer. But notice in verse 6, Paul says, serve, not by way of eye service. Not by way of eye service. What does that mean? It means that what I'm doing, I do really hard right now because my boss is walking by. And when my boss gets past, then I sit back, prop my feet up, start twiddling my thumbs. Paul says don't do that. And of course, this morning we're really talking about our service to God. We don't serve in order to be seen by the elders or the deacons or the preacher. But there's something that needs to be done. We say, if I do this for the church, I am serving God. Not with eye service as men pleasers, but as slaves of Christ, doing the will of God from your heart. Doing the will of God from your heart with good will. Verse 7, render service as to the Lord and not to men. Knowing that whatever good thing each one does, this he will receive back from the Lord, whether slave or free. This morning in our class downstairs, in Brother Frank's class downstairs, he asked the question, why would a Christian be a good employee? Here's one reason Paul says here. Because you put yourself into your work and you're going to make the company stronger because you're taking care of your responsibility and you're not doing it to be seen of men because you don't care who gets the credit. You want to see the task fulfilled. Even more so is that true in the church. That there's things that need to be done. And we say, I don't care who gets the credit. I'm going to step in and see that work gets done. There are 750 halls of fame in the United States. 750 halls of fame. There are 450 who's who publications. 450. You know, our country and the world does not understand the difference between being prominent and being significant. Getting into the Hall of Fame is prominent. Most of those halls of fame are filled with people who weren't significant. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the Baseball Hall, they're not significant. Who's Who publications, they're not necessarily significant. The Apostle Paul talks in 1 Corinthians chapter 12 about the physical body. And he says those parts of the body that are the most visible are ultimately the least significant. The parts of the body that are the most invisible are the most important. The brain, the heart, the lungs, the intestines. These parts out here on the outside, the hands, the ears, the feet, those are the most visible, but I can live without those. But I can't live without what's most important. Servants in the church are what's most important. And God blesses servanthood. In 1 Corinthians chapter 15 and verse 58, the Apostle Paul says, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, for you know that your service, labor, is not in vain in the Lord. And so God's servants don't care who gets the credit. But a work needs to be done, and so the servant jumps in and does it. What about our servants in the Church of Christ here in Paris? What can we do? Now, back in January, following the church retreat that we had in December, the elders presented a list of things that need to be done, that need to be taken care of here at the building. Some of the things here at the building, some of the things don't have to be done here. Some things need to be done on a Sunday, after services, before services. Some things need to be done here at the building, but sometime during the week, it doesn't matter when. Some of those things have been taken care of, fulfilled. Some of them are taken care of by just 2 or 3 people. And it ought not be that way. I know we've got a congregation here with people with servants' hearts. And you saw that list maybe and you said, well, I'll take care of it if somebody else doesn't do it. And that's a good servant heart, but it's not the volunteer servant heart, because when everybody says, well, I'll do it if nobody else does it, it winds up nobody does it. It doesn't get done. So there's a list of things out there that I'm asking you, challenging you to use your talents to step up and say, okay, here's some work that needs to be done. I'm going to take care of it. And if we have 2 people to volunteer for it, that would be great. We say, okay, y'all take turns. Now, maybe you've not walked by the table and seen the list, but now I'm presenting it to you and saying, here's some opportunities for us to serve. Taking care of the Bibles and the psalm books in the pews, and the visitors' cards, and making sure the pencils have a point on them that can be used to write with. Changing the light bulbs when they have to be changed. Making sure everything's okay in the bathrooms and in the kitchen. Maybe even cleaning the kitchen a few times during the year. Most of these things, I'm telling you, somebody does it. But the responsibility falls on 2 or 3 people. And it should be